It's not very often that we get pre-built systems land with us in the eTeknix offices, but we're always keen to get them in because they can sometimes offer up superior value to what you can actually build yourself. And today should be no exception with the MSI Infinity Elite from CyberPower. So first up, as the name suggests, this build is going to be quite heavy on MSI parts. And I want to say thanks to MSI for actually sponsoring this video. Though in terms of the build and the overall quality, don't think that doesn't mean I won't be brutally honest and critique what CyberPower have actually done, because you better believe that's definitely going to be happening here today. So let's actually talk through the build and then go into those glorious benchmarks to see how it performs, because I'm guessing that's pretty much why you're here in the first place. So first things first is the case, which is actually CyberPower's very own ARC panoramic case in white. It's very, reminiscent of other cases on the market like the Lian Li 011 Dynamic, Antec C8 and even the NZXT H9. And you know what? That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's obviously a very good design that users seem to want. So if CyberPower are able to get their own version manufactured to keep costs down, then why not? Now the case itself is white, but it does actually come available in black, but the white just adds a clean aesthetic to it and features two glass panels, one on the front and then one on the side, with a fairly subtle CyberPower logo on the front. The case has plenty of support for fans, and CyberPower have populated it quite nicely to strike a balance of airflow without adding on unnecessary costs with tons of RGB or extra fans that, well, just simply won't make a difference. Now speaking of fans, I am actually a little bit torn. The AIO, which we'll talk about shortly, comes with two RGB fans, while the other four fans that are inside are just generic CyberPower 120mm PWM black fans, which isn't an issue if you're trying to keep costs down, though even looking at CyberPower's configurator for this build, there wasn't actually much in it between the non-RGB and RGB versions, and that's even taking 6 fans into account. So even the ones on the AIO could actually be replaced so that the RGB would sync up nicely. As well, in my opinion, there's nothing worse than a mismatched RGB build that features different components that don't quite synchronize. Also, when you go on the configurator, it actually chooses the RGB fans as standard and is actually £4 cheaper. So maybe there's an error there, but either way, it's £4. Now, the AIO itself is the Core Liquid E240 White from MSI and features ARGB fans, which frankly look great, along with a subtle RGB block that sits on the CPU, which can be rotated up to 270 degrees. So no matter kind of the orientation of the system that you're actually going to be putting it in, it's always facing the right way up. Obviously, with the block and the fans being RGB does mean that it can all be synchronized through the included RGB hub that CyberPower have conveniently put behind the motherboard tray next to the power supply. There's also space for more RGB devices if you want to upgrade at a later date, as there is actually still plenty of empty RGB ports left on the hub itself. Now for the motherboard, it really, does come down to, a personal preference as to how much you want to spend, and this would then relate to features and power delivery. As this build is at a pretty modest price point, which I will talk about a little bit later on, they've gone with a board that does the job, with the MSI Pro Z790-S Wi-Fi. As the name suggests, it does come included with a Wi-Fi 6E module to get you up and gaming as quickly as possible, and also includes support for DDR5, the latest Intel processors, and PCI Express 5.0. It also has plenty of USB ports, including 20 gigabit per second USB Type-C and 2.5G Ethernet. So for even the most modest average gamer, it's kind of got a lot going for it. Now for the processor, like with all the other parts, you have a choice, but the configuration we have here includes a Core i5-14400F, a 10-core, 16-threaded processor that's capable of up to 4.7 GHz speeds, and comes equipped with 20 MB of Intel Smart Cache. While most people tend to see us talking about 14600Ks, 14700Ks, and even the i9 flagship 14900K, the 14400F is actually a very capable processor for the money, especially when it comes to gaming, where most games only actually utilize a few cores and threads. So having the balance of a decent core count and fast clock speeds is where the Intel i5 CPU actually outperforms the competition from AMD at a similar price point. Now for gaming, you're going to need a good amount of storage, and long gone are the days of having a small SSD for Windows and a larger hard drive for your games, because NVMe drives have actually dropped in price, well, quite dramatically, and that's how they've managed to squeeze in the MSI Spatium M450 PCI Express 4.0 1TB NVMe drive, With a read speed of up to 3600 megabytes a second and write speeds up to 3000 megabytes a second, it's plenty fast enough to get you loaded into your game quickly and without any performance degradation. And as our motherboard has a second NVMe slot along with 4 SATA ports, we have lots of room for future proofing and upgradability in terms of storage. Now for the memory, this really comes down to your individual budget and what you're willing to spend. With memory, it comes down to a few things. Firstly, what capacity you want. Secondly, what speed you want. And thirdly, what latency, which combined can make the world of a difference when it comes to gaming and getting the very best performance. Here we have a pretty balanced 32GB of Corsair Vengeance 5200MHz CL40 memory, which of course has a lick of RGB to tie things together with that MSI cooler. You could obviously spend more, but with memory, it does get to a point where you're talking diminishing returns, and spending 10% more won't necessarily get you 10% more performance. And that really comes down to the individual and, well, how much spare cash they actually have. So, the big one, the graphics card, the GPU, the thing that actually gives you the performance you're looking for in-game. And for the money, CyberPower have actually chosen well with the MSI RTX 4060 Ventus 2X OC in white. Firstly, the colour helps to tie the system together with its kind of black and white monochrome look, but also will be perfect for 1080p and even 1440p gamers, thanks to its Ada Lovelace architecture and DLSS upscaling, including frame generation, which will push our frame rates to the moon. Also, being an RTX card, you'll get a whole host of RTX features, including ray tracing with path tracing and ray reconstruction. You also get RTX voice for real-time noise removal, and through NVIDIA Studio functionality, you have AI at your fingertips to model your very own creations. Now, to power this little, powerhouse of a system is the InWin P85 F2 850W gold-rated ATX 3.0 power supply. While other maybe more known brands are available, InWin actually makes some very capable units, and being ATX 3.0 means that we get the latest technology that can handle any transient spikes or sudden load jumps. And being gold rated means that our efficiency is at an already good level, while 850 watts is actually overkill for the system. So it looks like maybe some thought has gone into it in regards to leaving some headroom for a CPU and maybe even a GPU change at a later date if you wanted to, especially as it has a native 12VH PWR connector on the power supply. Also, it's worth noting if you wanted to kind of carry on with the MSI theme, you can pick up their 850 watt for about £19 more in the configurator. Also, this system came to us with Windows 11 Home pre-installed, so that's included into the price, though if you were using Linux or maybe you already had access to Windows, there's nothing stopping you configuring the system without Windows and just saving yourself a small chunk of money. But again, that comes down to personal preference. All in all, I'm actually going to say it's a pretty well balanced system, and some clear choices have been made to not overcompensate in one area by sacrificing in another. The i5 4060 combo is exactly the type of system I'd go for, along with 32GB of DDR5 memory and a 1TB Gen 4 NVMe SSD. Short of the fans and me being picky in terms of RGB, I think maybe they sent them out with the black fans as an error, there isn't really anything I'd change on the system. So all of this is available in its current configuration for £1,203.60, and that will not only get you the system delivered to you in around a week, but will also come included with a 5-year labour warranty, 2 years on the parts, and a 12-month collect and return policy, along with lifetime technical support, which is all something you wouldn't get if you were building it yourself. Sure, you'd get the warranty on the parts, but it would be your responsibility beyond that. Now, speaking of building it yourself, I actually spec'd up a similar build, though obviously had to guesstimate the price of the case as it's not sold separately, and chose similar 120mm PWM fans and a fan controller to match. And as this PSU isn't available in the retail channel, I had to go for something similar there too. And in total, it all came out at £1,213.20p, which is actually £9.60 more expensive than buying it direct from CyberPower, which if building yourself doesn't get you the extra warranty and support, and also that ease that someone else has built it for you up to, the standard that you'd expect from a brand like CyberPower. Now, leading on from that, it's always something I'm keen to look at, the build side of things. We can all buy components and slam them together, but taking pride in the build itself and its cable management is, well, an important aspect when you're buying a pre-built system. And CyberPower have actually done a really good job here, making use of lots of zip ties, which they've also cut down to make things look cleaner, and have used the case's zip tie points to make sure cables stay into place. Even though the PSU isn't modular, all of the cables are actually held together quite nicely, and the case has actually still got, even though it is quite small, quite a lot of room to tuck the unnecessary kind of cables away while letting the system and the PSU breathe. So it's all looking like the system ticks all the right boxes, but the important question, how does it perform? Well, that's what we're going to find out by putting it through its paces in a smattering of games, while not only looking at the performance in terms of raw frame rate, but also in terms of the temperatures to make sure that the system as a whole is kept under control and it's doing its job. Now, for our test and where we think the system is catering for, we were going to run everything at 1080p, but instead we did some tests off camera and now we're running all of our tests at 1440p. But you better believe we're making use of those fancy ray trace visuals along with utilising DLSS with frame generation where possible. While it's likely more suited for 1080p and you can still use DLSS, it starts looking a bit naff, as if you're upscaling from below 1080, so it will suffer. And we wanted to see if you could still get respectable frame rates at a higher resolution like 1440p on what is typically classed as, I guess, a budget system. And yeah, I think the results may actually surprise you. Okay, so starting things off with Alan Wake 2, and you can see we are at 1440. We are actually running a little bit lower because we have got DLSS enabled on the balance mode, so it actually comes out at 1485 by 835. DLSS is enabled, and we've got that all-important frame generation on. Now, in terms of the settings, we have gone medium, which I know a lot of people are going to want to go a little bit higher, but medium in Alan Wake looks absolutely amazing regardless. You could actually class high in some areas as kind of diminishing returns. That sets most things to medium, apart from the shadows, which are also now set to high, fog quality, terrain quality, and far object detail also on high, and then object density set to ultra. Now, the important one is ray tracing. So we have got the ray tracing preset set to medium. Ray reconstruction's on, direct lighting, and then we're on medium for the path tracing and high for transparency. Now, if we come out and actually go into the game, I mean, straight away you can see visually it is absolutely stunning. It's probably regarded as one of the best looking games ever. You can see the ray tracing reflections sort of on the ground where we shine our light, and we are getting 64 frames per second. If I just sort of run around, we are going to see a few little drops, but not really too much. It's a pretty well optimized game. We're kind of 62 FPS now. So pretty impressive frame rates. Now, when it comes to the temperatures, this is even more so impressive. So CPU package is currently at 38, 39. It did climb a little bit, but it's actually gone back down, sort of 35, back up to 39. It's not really going above 40. It did hit 40 just for a split second there, but it's not really going too high. So yeah, pretty good on the CPU package. It's definitely kept under control thanks to it being a 65 watt part and that wonderful 240mm MSI AIO. Now, when it comes to the GPU temperature, even that pretty reasonable temperature, 64 degrees. I mean, this is a 4060, so it was never going to be too high. But yeah, we're getting a stunning looking game, really good temperatures and really good performance that just peaked up then to about 66 FPS. So yeah, really happy with that and just really happy with the way this looks. Okay, so next game up is, of course, Cyberpunk. We couldn't, let this system go by without testing in Cyberpunk. So again, we are at 1440p. Going over to the graphics tab, we've set it to Ray Tracing Ultra. DLSS Super Resolution is on, and we're going to set that to Balanced, which then turns this into Custom. But I wanted to show you that it was actually that preset to start with. We've also got Ray Reconstruction we're going to turn on. Frame Generation is also on. You can see Ray Tracing is all on here. Set to Ultra, much like what the preset's actually done. Crowd Density is on High. Everything else is basically on or on High. High, Ultra. So yeah, lots of decent settings there. Let's apply that and get into the game. So wait for it to just settle. Cyberpunk kind of always has a habit of doing this. But we are essentially at 60 FPS, 57 FPS. If we run around, we can see it does actually go up to sort of 60, 63. We're in a pretty intensive part of the game as well. There is a lot going on here in terms of obviously the sunlight coming through, lots of people in terms of the crowd density, really nice reflections on the floor, really nice sort of shadows casted. And yeah, we're getting 62, 64 FPS, so well above that kind of magical 60 FPS number that most gamers kind of crave for. You know, even down to the detail of sort of, you know, the sort of smoke coming out of the vent or steam coming out of the vent. But yeah, lots of people around, lots of cars, lots of stuff going on, lots of sort of dynamic lighting, and yeah, still getting amazing performance, sort of well above 60 FPS. Now, in terms of the temperatures, we are 42 degrees on the CPU, 41, 43, so hovering around sort of the low 40s. And then our GPU temperature again is showing that MSI cooler on there is really doing a good job in terms of keeping temperatures low on our RTX 4060. Again, sort of low 60s, 63, up to sort of 65 in places. So yeah, again, very impressive performance at 1440p. Even with the upscaling, things do still look very, very good. And yeah, some sort of really immersive kind of lighting and shadows that are going on here. Okay, so next one up is Hogwarts Legacy. Quite a graphically intensive game. For anyone who's played it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. We are at 1440p. Obviously, the render resolution is lower at 58% because we do have NVIDIA DLSS enabled, and that's set to balanced. Beyond that, frame generation is turned on and frame rate is uncapped. Nothing else really to talk about there. But if we go into the graphics options, it does say custom. It's just a little bit of a weird thing. It is actually set to ultra. As you can see, everything is basically set to ultra. We've also got ray tracing turned on and then ray tracing quality set to high. Now, if we come out and actually go into the game and then wait for the frame rate to settle. Now, we are in actually one of the most intensive parts of the game, so there's a lot going on sort of in the distance, up close, lots of textures, lots of kind of foliage through the trees and things like that. And even in this game, the weather can actually make quite a bit of a difference. So let's start running around. Now, there is actually a corner down here where the frame rate normally dips, but it's pretty decent today. So yeah, 83 frames per second, 80, sort of in towards 75, 78. Doesn't really drop below sort of 70, 79. There's a lot of people, so crowd density, that can sometimes make a difference. But for the most part, we're kind of low 80s, 83, 85, even up to 87 now. There you go, drops down to 77, depending on sort of where you are in the scene. Now, in terms of the temperatures, CPU package is actually quite surprising. 40 degrees, 37 degrees, pretty much where you'd expect it to be sort of idle, I guess, on a stock cooler. So the MSI Core Liquid is actually doing a very, very good job of keeping the CPU temperature intact. Same with the GPU actually, 62, 63 degrees. So yeah, the 4060 with that MSI twin fan cooler on there is doing a very, very good job. It's not really deviating too much from sort of 62, 63 degrees. So yeah, overall again, very, very good performance and very good temperatures. Okay, so last game up is Spider-Man Remastered. Really great game, if not a little bit repetitive. Again, we're at 1440p, reflex is on, frame generation is set on, and super resolution is set to balanced. As we go over to graphics, we're on very high. Ray tracing is also on, and that's set to high, and then everything else just follows the preset. So pretty much high, very high, and turned on. So if we come out and actually go to the game, wait for it to settle for a few seconds, and we're at 92, 93 FPS. If we run along, we can see again, sort of 92, 94 FPS. This is actually one area which is really cool because the ray tracing really sort of shows the benefits here with the reflection of the trees and everything. Kind of looks almost like polished glass, I guess is the kind of the easiest way to explain it. You can see the people reflecting in it and also the buildings and everything as well. So yeah, 97, 98 FPS. If we swing around a little bit, we should actually see the frame rate go up because we're in kind of a less sort of densely populated area, if that makes sense. So 110 FPS, 113. And then in terms of the temperatures, we're at 43 degrees, 46 degrees on the CPU. So everything's kept under control there. And sort of 60 to 61 degrees on the GPU. So again, very similar to what we were seeing. Really good, sort of decent performance, really nice visuals with the lighting effects and shadows, and very good performance thanks to the MSI AIO and MSI graphics card doing their job. So I think it's safe to say that the system performed how I expected it to. I wanted to push it through the use of visuals, hence the games that we picked, and the fact that they are some of the most intensive games on the market for pushing both the CPU and the GPU. And with the aid of ray tracing, we were actually able to push the limits of our hardware as far as we could while maintaining stunning looking visuals. Obviously, this does come at a cost, and thanks to AI upscaling through DLSS, we were able to boost the frame rate after the hit that it actually took by cranking up the settings. Throughout the testing, the temperatures were well within a range that I'd expect, and the noise output was also well within tolerable limits that you'd never really hear when gaming, as you'd likely have your headphones on and would be enjoying the experience. So I guess what I'm trying to say, there's no complaints there whatsoever. I mean, the i5-14400F is a 65 watt component, so it was never going to get stupidly hot. And then the E240 from MSI just managed to keep it under control. Sure, aesthetically a 360mm would have been the nicer choice, but again, that also comes at a cost, but you can also configure that. So if you want to spend a little bit more money to have that, by all means do so. Now, speaking of the cost, I think anyone who has a budget of around £1,200 or call it $1,600 in the US, because CyberPower does operate there too, they'd be stupid not to buy something like this. You could tweak the fans to get that full-on RGB look for not much more money, even though technically when I looked it was less. And thanks to the configurator on the CyberPower website, you get full control over essentially every component. So you could take with one hand and give with another, depending on your needs. Though, as mentioned, I think they've managed a kind of extremely well-balanced system here. And for the choice they made, beyond the fans not being RGB, like I said, I think that's just an oversight with our system here. I have no complaints. And the fact that you're saving money while also getting someone else to build it, and you're getting that extra peace of mind through the warranty and lifetime technical support, well, it really is a bit of a no-brainer. Couple that in with the top brands on the market like MSI, Corsair and Intel, and you have, well, a pretty sweet system that should last you for years to come. So that's going to about do it for this one. It feels nice looking at a pre-built system again. We honestly don't do it enough. So if you did like this, where we drill down into the parts and focus on the value for money element, let me know in the comment section, along with giving us a like on the video. It's honestly the best way to tell if you like a certain piece or a certain type of content or not. So with that in mind, hopefully you did enjoy the video. If you did, a like and a sub to the channel would be amazing. And if you love what we do, then consider supporting us through Patreon, where you'll get access to a lot of our testing data, a super special exclusive area on our Discord, bi-weekly game nights, meetups at the eTeknix headquarters, and so much more. The link is, as always, down below, along with that link of where you can actually buy this. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.